Culture shock is a phrase that is used to describe the feeling of sensory overload that many people experience when they visit or move to a new country.
And of course, when we first came to China, this certainly applied to us. But after many years, the things that initially shocked us started to become routine. The construction noise faded into the background. We got used to the mind-blowingly spicy dishes. And we learned how to quickly navigate the vastly different work culture with all its quirks and customs. After a few years, China goes from a holiday destination to the place that you live. And then something rather strange happens when you eventually return to the place that you once called home. They call it reverse culture shock.
Things that seem totally normal to you when you're growing up now seem downright weird.
Why is this food all so beige?
And the people you once called friends just don't look the same as you remember.
Got so old. What happened, Matilda? Oh.
And your family members will get bored of you constantly telling them how much better things were back in China. Full disclosure though, I'm not actually back in my home country of the UK.
Whereas I very much am.
I've in fact moved to Auckland, which is where my brother lives, and my parents will be for the next 6 months. It's obviously more of a Western-leaning country, so whilst I've experienced some good old reverse culture shock, I've also observed some curious cultural differences from the UK. In a way, it does in fact remind me of the UK. Most people speak English, the food is very similar, and the scenery around Auckland reminds me of our rolling green hills. But then you see an exotic bird and you remember where you are. What is happening, New Zealand? It is meant to be summer right now. It is January and it's absolutely pouring. It's very, very windy here. It's like I'm back in the UK. We haven't been to the South Island yet, but Jack is coming over in February and we're going to explore the whole country together. I'm so excited because I've heard it's absolutely amazing and I'm ready for the scenery to be a bit more dramatic.
In the UK, I would describe the landscape perhaps more as quaint rather than dramatic. I mean, it can still be quite beautiful, but it's not like China, where often when we were traveling and we were out in the countryside, it felt like we were on another planet.
In China, it was quite rare to hear other people speak English, so you're kind of in a language bubble. But now I'm definitely experiencing some sensory overload as I constantly hear people babble away in my native language.
Honestly, it's bloody irritating. I just cannot tune other people out. That means that when I come to crowded places, I just end up being forced to eavesdrop on other people's incredibly mundane conversations. So to be honest, that is why I only come out when the weather's kind of like today, so there's a lot less people out and about and I don't have to listen to them talking absolute waffle, although they'd probably say the same about me, wouldn't they?
What is nice is there's quite a large Chinese community here in Auckland, so I often hear people speaking Chinese, which gives me this warm, homely feeling inside.
Now, as we were in China for a fair few years, I spent a lot of time and a lot of energy trying to learn the lingo. To be honest, I'm absolutely terrified that now I'm back in the UK, I'm just going to lose all of my language learning progress. As in my experience, it's actually a lot easier to lose your skills than it is to gain them in the first place.
We've made it pretty clear in our videos that we haven't quite finished our China journey yet, and it certainly wasn't the ending that we had planned. So I have no doubt in my mind that at some point this year we will be traveling back to China, especially now that it's opening up, but I really don't want to go back and feel like I know none of the language again.
When we left, I was absolutely terrified that I wouldn't keep up with my Chinese learning. After all, I've come back to the UK for the first time in 3 years, and I'm pretty busy, you know, got a social life once again. But I found a little hack. Every morning, I open an app called Rosetta Stone, and I crack on with a little bit of Chinese for half an hour or so.
一家饭店.
一家饭店.
Super easy, fits nicely into the routine, and Rosetta Stone were also kind enough to sponsor this video.
Now, previously, I was using a dusty old textbook to help me learn Chinese, and my God, was it boring. I much prefer using the Rosetta Stone app because it's way more interactive. It also has a daily progress tracker, so I know exactly what I need to be doing, and there can be no excuses.
You hear that? No excuses.
I think my favorite feature of all is the fact that it actually helps you practice your speaking.
这个女人来看她的母亲.
Because I've noticed when you step outside of China, that is the first thing for me to go.
Plus, who wants to carry around textbooks all the time when you can easily whip out your phone and do a quick lesson, whether you're at the beach, at the park, or waiting for a friend. Waiting for a friend. Molly. Okay, good girl. Or waiting for a friend. Oh, hi friend. Me, Molly.
So whether you're heading back to China this year and you want to brush up on your Chinese, or perhaps you want to take the first steps on your language learning journey, then I recommend you give Rosetta Stone a try. Oh, Rosetta, you little beauty.
I wish I started learning Chinese a lot sooner, to be honest. Once I did manage to pick up a bit of the language, it allowed us to travel to far more interesting places and have far more meaningful interactions along the way.
And it's not just Chinese. You can learn 25 different languages on the app. This year, we're hoping to travel to a few different countries, one of them being Italy, which is where my great-grandparents are from. I've made it my goal for this year to learn as much Italian as possible.
Lui mangia del riso.
Lui mangia del riso.
If you guys click on the link below, then for just $179, you will get a lifetime subscription to all of the languages on the app, which is a huge exclusive discount.
I think it's really useful to learn a little bit of the language wherever you travel to. It also helps with the culture shock because you can speak to the locals and learn more about their culture. People really appreciate it when you try to speak to them in their native tongue, even if it's just to order food or buy a ticket on public transport.
And speaking of public transport, we have a large community of Chinese expats in my city, and I just can't stop thinking about what they must be thinking when they see the state of this country's infrastructure. I'm honestly appalled at just how bad they've let public transport get in this country. It's just totally being allowed to rot.
When I lived in the center of Beijing, a city with 22 million people, you could easily walk, cycle, or take the metro anywhere that you wanted to go. But my brother lives in the suburbs here, so it's kind of hard to get places unless you have a bus pass or a car. Luckily, after the first few days of adjusting, I stopped feeling like I was stuck in the suburbs, and I got myself a bus pass, I got insured in the car, and I got a SIM card. So now I have everything I need so I can explore.
But maybe that's because I'm from a provincial town of just shy of 1 million people and not the capital city. I actually went down to London to visit my brother this past weekend.
Stop it, I'm not in your vlog.
Yeah, the public transport's definitely a lot better there. It's got a very impressive tube network. Although I've got to say, I think it was probably built a long time ago when the population was a lot smaller, and it's not necessarily best place to handle busy rush hour. It's also pretty expensive too.
How much do you spend in a day on a metro, would you say? I think it's slightly under £10. It maxes out.
You're absolute spenny, mate.
Yeah, absolute spenny.
Shut up.
Oh, that's steep, I tell you.
It feels so nice to be able to drive around places. Whilst we technically could have done this in China, there wasn't really much point because we lived in the centre of the city. Here though, it's so convenient. And a bonus is they drive on the left, just like the UK.
We are definitely a lot more reliant on cars here in the West. I'd say that whilst in Beijing, having a car is kind of a status symbol almost. Here in the UK, it is an absolute necessity.
Especially in the cold British winter. Luckily for me though, it's summer down here in the southern hemisphere. Although you might not be able to tell, it's absolutely pouring. It's very windy here. It's like I'm back in the UK. But that hasn't stopped me going to the beach every opportunity that I can. I'm not enjoying the mosquito bites or sunburn though. Even though it was a lot hotter in China, the ozone layer is much thinner down here in New Zealand, so my pale skin is getting burnt to a crisp.
No sunburn for me, but one thing that absolutely burns my eyes is the sight of toilet roll down the toilet. You can flush it down your drain and it won't even destroy your pipes. Isn't that just utter madness?
Yeah, I keep reaching for the bin every time I go. And speaking of toilets, they're all sit-down toilets here, even in public places. Whew, my squatting game is going to be weak after being here for so long.
I'm still keeping in practice, but to be honest, I have been trying to avoid public toilets as much as possible because it really freaks me out thinking about just how many people's dirty bottoms have touched that bloody toilet seat. Blech.
Cleanliness is not an issue in New Zealand. This country could well lay claim to having the finest and most abundant selection of public toilets in the world. They're clean, they have toilet paper, and they have soap, which feels like quite the luxury.
And whilst we're on the topic of fluids, watch this. I still can't get over the fact that you can drink water straight from the tap without even boiling it.
Yeah, you might not get sick from the tap water, but that doesn't stop me from feeling constantly homesick. My heart aches for China, for Beijing, and for the life that we built there. Luckily, I found an Asian supermarket, and honestly, I nearly cried because it felt like home. It was so nice to see things that I used to enjoy in China here in New Zealand, but with a much bigger price tag. Baby Yang,
It's like I'm back in Beijing. Lemon spicy hot pot is like my favourite flavour of crisps.
If you think that's expensive, then you should come to a British supermarket, Nico. Honestly, the prices have gone up so much. The UK is currently undergoing like a heavy bout of inflation and a real cost of living crisis. And honestly, everyday goods are just so much more expensive than the last time we were home. This used to be 37p, now it's a swapping 90p.
Fortunately, the British diet is quite simple, so most people can survive by eating copious amounts of bread. I have just absolutely lost count of how much beige coloured food I've eaten in the past month or so. Man, what I would do for a spicy Sichuan dinner right now. My God, do I miss flavour. It's cardboard in it. That's better.
Well, get yourself down to the Chinese supermarket, Jack, and get cooking for your family. To be fair, though, we didn't really cook a lot of Chinese food when we lived in China because, well, why would we? We live in China. There's so many amazing chefs, and it was much easier and cheaper to just go to a local noodle joint for lunch.
Noodles. I need to master making noodles from scratch. Fast, because honestly, this is the kind of crap that people eat in the UK. People will pair them with some like nasty stir-fry sauce like this.
I managed to find a pretty legit restaurant here where the owner and the chef were from Chongqing. So I took my mum for some bobo tea, some Szechuan noodles, and some char siu.
Wow, it's spicy, very spicy. My lips are starting to tingle and I can just feel this numbness on them. So flavoursome, but wow, the kick, the kick.
That was amazing, but it was a little bit more expensive than in China. To be honest, New Zealand is expensive. Every time I go to the shop or the pub, I'm constantly checking the prices. That's not the weirdest thing that I've seen in the supermarket. You see, here in New Zealand, people like to walk around barefoot. Now, I'm not just talking about at the beach. In the street as well, people walk around with no shoes on.
Oh my God, that is hilarious. No, you certainly couldn't walk around barefoot in the UK. And I think if you did, you'd probably step on a broken bottle, maybe a hubcap, or at the very least end up with incredibly muddy feet whilst walking around the streets. And talking of streets, it's absolutely mind-blowing to be walking around suburbia once more. Just so different to China.
Yeah, in the UK, you find a lot less of these identikit apartment blocks that you find in China. But what you will find is like identikit housing estates. But here in Auckland, it's totally different. Maybe it's just the area that I'm in, but all of the houses are completely different. They're so unique and they are huge. I would love to see inside some of them.
I still reckon I prefer the China vibes though. At the end of the day, the energy that you find in Chinese cities is just unlike anything I have experienced elsewhere.
I agree, but it's interesting that many years in China has made us view the UK completely differently. We kind of anticipated this happening, so before we left China, we filmed a series of comparison videos where we film half in China and half in the UK, and we talk about many of these topics. But before that, we've got a Shanghai and Chengdu series coming out throughout 2023, so make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of our videos. Also, leave us a comment letting us know what different culture shocks you've experienced around the world. It might even inspire us to make a whole new culture shock video. Yes, finally some blue sky. Do you know what that means? It means I'm off to the beach to learn some Italian. Don't forget to click the link below to start learning your new language and for a lifetime subscription for only $179 with Rosetta Stone. Bye!